With the two series talked about most on my channel being Dragon Ball and Buffy, it was inevitable one of my comparison videos would be on both. It was recently that I thought of how similar Season 4 of Buffy is to the Cell arc of Dragon Ball, with both addressing the direction previous events had, in Dragon Ball needing to find a way for the story to have weight when returned to Earth after going to space, and the Scoobies in Buffy struggling to find direction when moving beyond high school, both having a former deadly enemy being a regular member of the cast whose motives are to the detriment of the main characters, or both having the main threat altered due to behind-the-scenes events, with Maggie Walsh's role being unceremoniously cut due to her actress having a busy schedule, and 19 and 20 being changed from being the main threat due to Torishima not being satisfied with them, as both scientists part of the main threat have their lives ended by their creation. It's in this comparison between Maggie and Gero that we move on to comparing the main threat of scientific creation in both series, with Adam in Buffy Season 4 and Cell in Dragon Ball. If there was a stretch of the series, aside from the first season and a half, that shows Buffy isn't 100% excellent, it'd be how the Adam plot makes the latter half of Season 4 too directionless for a point where the stakes are meant to be ramped up, along with building on what came before. Adam seems like a good idea in premise, due to him taking Buffy's overarching theme of human nature, producing more evil than the series' physical demons, in the creation of a hybrid of human, demon, and cybernetic parts, through humanity's science and curiosity. Beyond the premise though, he is a contender for Buffy's worst big bad, as his execution and arc boils down to an existentialist quest that is resolved abruptly when talking to a child in a fairly rushed homage to the 1930s Frankenstein film, and then being reduced to no more than a physical obstacle for Buffy, and an instrument of Maggie's legacy. There are a few interesting tidbits, such as him recognizing Jonathan's superstar reality as false, but this isn't explored any further. It also shows when, in the episode before his climactic fight with Buffy, the main inner conflict amongst the Scoobies is through Spike's manipulation rather than any part Adam played. Speaking of which, I have a Season 4 Spike video here. In fairness, any character teaming up with Spike is naturally going to have the spotlight taken from them. But Adam not even adding to the character conflicts in the season beyond being able to punch very hard, makes him little more than wasted potential, when the thematic elements that made his premise superb are executed infinitely better in Season 6 with Warren and Dark Willow. On that note, onto Cell. Despite being created out of editorial meddling, it's impressive how much better Cell perfectly succeeds in the points I criticised Adam of failing in. The most obvious strength of Cell's role in the narrative is in its genetic makeup having it reflect the Dragon Team, in it turning their strength against them, using their character flaws to its advantage, or its presence being a display of Trunks' failure before the latter is able to change things for his future, paradoxically due to Cell. See my video on the arc's display of fatherhood for more on the strength of Cell's character arc. This allows for Cell to fit naturally as the arc's antagonist, not only with Gero's machinations having been well established prior, or how their role adds to the idea of time travel only causing problems rather than fixing them, see this video for more, but it representing the overarching idea that the Dragon Team's character flaws bring about their own worst enemies for this arc. It acts as a foil to Piccolo, in both taking the tactical approach to their battle, or to Vegeta in the immense pride Cell has, or, more interestingly, to Goku in their desire to test themselves. But for opposing reasons. Goku wishes to test his limits and become stronger on his own, or through the tutelage others can provide in his Shugyo, whereas Cell does so through using others as food, and has the Cell game as a means to affirm its belief in its superiority. It's through this that Cell reflects how Piccolo or Vegeta could be if circumstances caused them to stay evil, or act as an evil Goku in a far more subtle manner than any other attempts before and after it. Another thing that makes Cell an engaging villain to watch, compared to both Adam and even several Dragon Ball villains, is in it growing over time, both physically and mentally, with it both changing its mindset with each step closer to perfection, and having to work for their power-ups, unlike Frieza being able to transform several times at a moment's notice, or Boo just requiring putting a piece of him around anyone without a strong enough barrier. As an example of this, a point of Cell's character arc that gets overlooked is in it not realizing Piccolo would regenerate his arm, despite it being a skill Cell possesses, which many write off as a plot hole or character inconsistency, when overlooking the few key details. It's not as though Toriyama forgot about it when Piccolo even remarks on Cell's oversight, and Cell remarks soon after that it could probably rather than definitely use a Genki Dama, showing Cell was still learning what it was capable of, as opposed to having 100% knowledge on everything it could do, with Piccolo's display helping enlighten it as to the capability of its regeneration, and influence Cell's approach to battle from there on. We then have their changing in motivations, as its cautious mannerisms start to fade once it believes it's ready to absorb 17 and 18, before eventually succeeding. Its perfect form personality is often accused of being Frieza-light in their actions against Gohan, but there are a lot of details that make Cell's personality fit with their journey. It's by that point that it moves beyond listening to Gero's programming to forging its own path and displays a full balance between Frieza and Vegeta's superiority complex, Piccolo Daimau's desire to place fear in their inferiors, and the Saiyan desire for battle and becoming stronger. Despite the pride normally associated with its perfect self, it is willing to admit when Trunks surpassed its raw strength, and shows more curiosity at its limits. Most likely when left to introspect over the 10 days wait and discover how much was below the surface. There's clearly a change in its outlook by the time of fighting Gohan, in which it is assured of none having raw power beyond theirs, and making a hypocritical mistake out of rage. It's through this that Cell further displays its narrative purpose, as a reflection of the Dragon Team's failings. Despite balancing the personality and techniques of so many key figures, this also stacked in at least 3 of the 5 people's genes comprising its genetic structure, being ones of personalities who make irrational or desperate decisions when overpowered, as well as adds to the juxtaposition of Cell's actions in balancing these traits. This allows Cell to function as a display of the strengths and weaknesses of Goku and his prior adversaries, along with why bringing in someone disconnected from the conflict with Cell was necessary to break the cycle. This leads into comparing another aspect of Cell and Adam, with how they tie into the wider themes of the story. Whereas Adam served as a means for which the Scooby Gang had to reconcile after their argument, as well as the repercussions of summoning the First Slayer's spirit, being explored in the final episode of Season 4, that acted as one of the series' best, most complex, and introspective episodes, examining the inner psyche of its main cast along with profound foreshadowing on what was to come. None of this is due to Adam, who only acted as a physical obstacle, with the argument being Spike's doing, and the need to unite against the big bad being nothing new. By comparison, Cell acts as an embodiment of all the arc's core themes, such as the problems of time travel, the flaws of the main cast, and, in particular, the complex nature of Goku's presence in his actions helping feed into Gohan's suffering and Cell's progress, that influences decision to not be revived, but also proves future Burima's assertion of the importance of having Goku defend the Earth, in it being his advice that allows Gohan to muster the key to destroy Cell. It also displays the inevitability of Gero's failure, not only in the impersonal and deliberate nature of its formation being undone by a more cultivated nurturing, as I went into in the previous Cell-centric video, but also in his desire to create ever stronger Jinzo Ningen, leading them to stray further from his ideals. The events of the arc also lead to such instances of character growth as Goku realizing the detrimental aspects of his presence, or Vegeta come to respect and value Trunks, or Gohan's views towards action against one incapable of being reasoned with, all being things that wouldn't be done simply by replacing Cell with a one-dimensional obstacle and trying to execute the same story beats. Going back to the point of Gero's failures, there's then the philosophical aspect of this artificial creation and Cell's view on the world. Those of you who watched Masako X's video on Cell may be aware of how surprisingly consistent Cell's ideals tie into the Nietzschean idea of the Übermensch in using their power to shape the world's trajectory and gain value from earthly materialistic properties, yet is juxtaposed by it also displaying the elements of what Nietzsche would call the last man, through Cell not wishing to live in a reality in which their claims of being an unchallenged being can be contradicted, in what is an inherently passive lifestyle, being undone by what's the closest the Dragon Team has to a pacifist. This interpretation ties in very well when acknowledging that Dragon Ball is at its core a Budo-Taoist story, with Taoism's overlapping with Christian teachings, making it fitting that its biggest antagonist at the time would be a representation of both the materialist philosophies of Nietzsche, who opposed Christian ideology, as well as them being the result of scientific alterations for controlled evolution and perfection that line up with concepts on eugenics, which are not only disavowed by Christians as an affront to God, but go against Taoist ideals of living in tune with the way of the natural world. And this ties into Cell's last man contradiction, as Nietzsche's Übermensch ideals placed value on one who ascended to greatness through their struggles, as with the Shugyo of the Dragon Team, rather than by design. This also fits with what I've talked of before in Buddhist teaching on the human body being the most suitable for enlightenment, being why monstrous characters become more humanoid in forms that bring their ki to their greatest level, and this being ingrained in Cell's design, which highlights the irony of a materialistic scientific creation, embodying very Western philosophies, being within and defeated by those in an Eastern story centered on Buddhist and Taoist spiritual principles. By comparison, Adam is given a path to have some existentialist thought play into his character arc, but it's swiftly getting abandoned as I mentioned before. It's for this and more that Cell stands as one of the greatest antagonists in Dragon Ball, and why Adam stands as one of the worst big bads in the Buffyverse. How would I say they compare to others in their series as a whole? Well, if there's enough demand, I may do a ranking video of Buffy and Angel's big bads. But as for Dragon Ball antagonists, there's a few traits from other villains that make it difficult for me to rank Cell, as you may be aware from my video praising Piccolo Daimao. At the very least though, Cell, Frieza, ignoring Super, Piccolo Daimao, and Baby occupy the top 4, with which of them I'd consider to be the best always being subject to change. Thank you if watching this far into the video. If wanting to see more to do with Dragon Ball or Buffy, there are plenty of videos available on this channel analysing both. If wanting to stay updated when I release new ones on both, be sure to subscribe in order to keep up to date, and I'll see you next time.